I want to begin with a confession. I may or may not have been a reckless driver in high school. In fact, when you look at all the speeding tickets and the accident reports, it's really not even debatable. I was a reckless driver. I remember this time when my friend Tony came in from out of town. I had this whole weekend planned out. And that next morning, he spent the whole morning following me around town. And I thought it would be a great idea to pretend like I was James Bond in some movie trying to shake a tail. I was driving like a complete idiot. I would put my left turn signal on and turn right. I would slow down, speed up. I was running yellow lights. I was passing people left and right. Well, that night we had planned to go to Tony's house for a party. And I remember as we loaded our friends into the car, the last thing Tony said to me, he looked at me and said, "You're following me now. Try to keep up." I wish I could tell you that that night ended well, but it didn't. It came to a screeching halt when I slammed into the back of his car going 85 miles per hour on the German Autobahn. I spun his car off into a ditch and I came to a screeching halt. An ambulance had to show up and take our friend Michelle to the hospital. The German police showed up and tried to arrest me. And then I had to sit across from a table and try to explain to my parents why we were there. The truth is, I had no clue. I had no clue that the way I was driving that morning would be connected to the painful penalties that I was suffering in that moment. In Proverbs chapter 27:12, it says this, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty." The second half of that verse really describes who I was as a high school student. Simple and paying a lot of penalties. There was not a prudent thing about me. See, the Bible describes a prudent person as someone who understands that all of life is connected, that the decisions that I make today affect what my tomorrow looks like. And we just started this series in Crash called Making Connections. And we're going to spend 7 weeks diving into the book of Proverbs, seeking to become prudent people, seeking to be people who understand how life works. But before we just dive in and pull out all the wisdom from this book, I think there's a few things you need to know. See, the book of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job are considered the wisdom books of the Bible. And together, they attempt to answer this question that I think is so relevant for your life. In fact, it's a question that I think everybody asks at some point. The question is this: how can I live a good life? Or, how can I be good at life? I don't know anybody that doesn't want to be good at life. And the book of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job gives a very simple answer to that question: wisdom. Or in the Hebrew, chokmah. These 3 books say that wisdom is the thing that we need to live a good life. And why is it so important? Well, if we look at in the book of Jeremiah, in chapter 10, verse 12, it says this: "But God made the earth by his power. He founded the world by his wisdom and stretched out the heavens by his understanding." See, the Bible describes wisdom as a characteristic of God, but not just that. The Bible says that wisdom is the very thing that God used to create and form and architect the physical and moral universe. And so everything that you know and everything that you interact with was created by God using wisdom. And the most amazing thing is said in the books of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. They say that we can take this wisdom and we can use it to build for ourselves a beautiful life. But before we rush off and attempt to do that and fail, Solomon, the author of Proverbs, has some advice for us. In fact, this is the first connection of all the connections that I want you to make. Listen very carefully. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7 says this: "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." Solomon makes this connection for us. He says we can't have wisdom unless we have the fear of the Lord. So what is the fear of the Lord? Well, first let's just talk about fear. What is fear? In fact, why don't we pause right now, and I want you to think, what is something that you're afraid of? People are afraid of all kinds of things. Some people are afraid of spiders. Some people are afraid of public speaking. I even know a student that's afraid of butterflies. Fear really has no boundary. But what's at the center of that fear? I think at the center of that fear is perceived power. Let me have you consider something. Let me explain what I mean. Look at somebody who's afraid of speaking publicly. Why are they afraid of that? I think deep down they're afraid of that because they believe that that thing has the power to absolutely and completely embarrass them in front of everyone that they know. And so if we take a step back and look at the fear of the Lord, what would be at the center of having this thing that Solomon describes as the fear of the Lord? I think it's this. Someone who has the fear of the Lord understands how truly powerful God is. There is no one or no thing that's more powerful than God. And once we understand that, and once we see that power, it invokes in us a fear. And what Solomon says is, once you take God and see God for who He really is, now you're ready to receive wisdom. So that's the first connection that I want you to make. That you can't have wisdom without the fear of the Lord. Well, I hope you join us Sunday night at 5:30. We're going to dive into another connection. We're going to see what the book of Proverbs has to say about relationships. What does the book of Proverbs have to say about being good at being a friend and making friends? So I hope you join us, and I'll see you later.